You believe that being good is enough to navigate this world, that by simply showing up, playing by the rules, and keeping your head down, you'll somehow remain untouched by the chaos. But take a moment to really observe. Who gets trampled on? Who is ignored, broken down, and cast aside the moment they falter? It's not the ruthless or the arrogant. It's the gentle, the kind, the compassionate, the ones who think their goodness will earn them the world's love. If Machiavelli were here, he'd say, if you're not ruthless, you're not prepared. The world will come for you. It always does. And when it does, you'll either crumble or harden. That's your choice. That's the battle. And whether you realize it or not, this choice is already before you. Most don't even see it for what it is because it doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like betrayal. The first time someone exploits your silence, the first time your kindness is mistaken for weakness, the first time you sit there, questioning how someone could do such a thing after all you did for them. And then, little by little, that doubt creeps in. That sharp voice inside starts whispering, maybe you're the fool. Maybe holding on to this goodness is costing you everything. But instead of addressing the voice, you push back against it. You try harder to be gentle, more understanding, more willing to forgive, telling yourself that if you just prove your worth, someone will treat you right. Anyone will see your value. Yet the truth is cruel. The world doesn't reward innocence. It rewards strength. And as Machiavelli made clear, power isn't about earning love. It's about how much pain you can endure without losing control. The powerful don't beg. They don't justify. They aren't defined by anyone but themselves. In a world persistent in testing every boundary you've set, letting things slide teaches others how to dismantle you with precision next time. And here's the real trap. Everyone thinks they're different, that they can be both kind and strong, endlessly giving without losing themselves. It works for a time, sure. But one day, you'll be awake at 3 a.m., wondering why the people you sacrificed for are the same ones stabbing you in the back. Wondering why your loyalty bred betrayal and why those whose battles you fought are now whispering your name with contempt. You'll search for answers. Maybe they were insecure. Maybe they didn't understand. Maybe it was just a mistake. But deep down, there's an answer too bitter to swallow. They did it because they could. Because they faced no consequence. Because they felt no fear. And here lies a truth nobody likes to admit. Fear is the invisible currency of every interaction. Not terror or brutality, but a subtle acknowledgement that crossing certain lines comes with repercussions. If your presence carries no weight, no sense of consequence, you'll find yourself endlessly used, overlooked, and discarded as soon as you're no longer convenient. The parts of you that yearn to be understood, the parts that cling to the belief that fairness will rescue you, those are the illusions you must release. The idea that people will change just because you love them harder is a comforting lie. They won't change unless they see that you will no longer tolerate disrespect. And most people, deep down, aren't ready to accept that shift. Because standing firm, being unyielding, comes with a price. People will misinterpret you, call you distant, cold, too intense, or uncaring. But that is the cost of becoming unbreakable. Ruthlessness isn't about cruelty. It's about precision and clarity. Knowing exactly what you will and will not accept. Understanding when to step away and when to act decisively. Realizing that misplaced mercy can lead to your downfall. These lessons aren't learned from books. They surface in those pivotal moments when someone betrays you, yet expects your loyalty, or when you finally say no, and they make you feel as though you've committed a crime. People accustomed to your self-sacrifice will always frame your boundaries as selfishness. It's in those moments you know you've drawn the line. Machiavelli didn't suggest we become monsters. He advised us to become unshakable. To survive in a world driven by dominance, you cannot navigate it as prey. You must become the kind of person who doesn't falter when faced with chaos. Someone who can endure the fire without flinching. Someone who doesn't seek closure or demand apologies. When ruthlessness stems from necessity rather than hatred, you find freedom in the clarity of not needing anyone's understanding. You only need them to know they cannot break you. And that's where transformation begins. The shift happens when you stop striving to be understood and start becoming undeniable, when your silence holds more power than someone else's shouting, when your very presence compels others to adjust themselves, not because of anything you said, but because your energy leaves no space for games. That is the essence of the Machiavellian approach, not noise or drama, simply presence. True presence comes from control, and real control comes from the certainty that at any moment you could tear everything apart and walk away without hesitation. This isn't something you can fake. The world will test you relentlessly. It will challenge your strength, poke at your resolve, and try to expose any cracks. If you yield even once, you confirm their suspicions that your power was a facade all along. But when you refuse to fold, meeting insults with composure, betrayal with indifference, and pressure with calculated action, something extraordinary happens. The same people who doubted you begin to fear disappointing you, not because you're cruel, but because you've shown them you don't need them. Independence is power. Needing nothing from anyone gives you choices. It allows you to walk away without hesitation, negotiate without desperation, and lead without seeking approval. That kind of self-sufficiency is palpable, primal even, impossible to counterfeit. Others sense it in a glance, a moment of stillness, or your refusal to react. This is the art of becoming ruthless, quiet, deliberate, and purposeful. Not about tearing everything down, but dismantling the illusions that once made you weak. Once those illusions are gone, the truth becomes clear. The world isn't cruel or fair. It simply is. Every person is playing a game. Some play to survive, some to dominate. But those who succeed play to outlast. And to outlast, resilience must become second nature, not just after one betrayal, but again and again until your strength becomes as natural as breathing. It doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means your emotions no longer govern your actions. You still care, but with boundaries. You still love, but with discernment. Most importantly, you give, not endlessly and blindly, but to those who have earned it. This is what sets the broken apart from the ruthless. The broken keep giving in an attempt to prove their goodness, while the ruthless give freely because they choose to, free from the fear of being judged. Machiavelli understood this balance of power. It isn't about being feared for fear's sake, but about commanding respect because restraint is mightier than revenge. The ability to destroy but choosing not to. This terrifies people more than threats ever could because it reveals total control over yourself and the situation. When others react impulsively and you choose deliberately, you shift the dynamic entirely in your favor. But reaching this point demands that you rise above fear, fear of rejection, explaining yourself to deaf ears, or proving your worth to those who thrive on your insecurity. True strength is quiet, deliberate, and undeniable, a calm certainty rooted in a deep understanding of yourself and the unshakable resolve to keep moving forward without bending for anyone unworthy of your presence. People don't fear those they completely understand. What they fear is the unknown, the unreadable, the indifferent. When you carry yourself with a composed yet calculated distance, you become an enigma, not by pretending to be someone else, but by finally breaking free from the patterns of oversharing, over-justifying, and over-apologizing. As you shift, a realization dawns. The less you explain your thoughts or actions, the more respect naturally follows. This isn't about playing games with others. It's about understanding the game so that you never find yourself as a pawn again. Life will undoubtedly test you through various people, those who shower you with flattery, those who provoke and challenge you, and those who profess love for you only until you dare to say no. Every encounter leaves behind a lesson on preserving your power, on avoiding emotional traps, and on protecting your emotional autonomy. The more you refine these skills, the less reactive and impulsive you become. Your peace evolves into something sacred, your time becomes invaluable, and people begin to notice that not everyone is granted access to your space. This isn't an act of coldness, but a boundary created after learning the hard lesson of giving too much, too soon, too often, and bleeding for those who brought neither help nor healing in return. You become more perceptive of actions over words, watching patterns instead of promises, silences over speeches. You stop being swayed by mere potential and start valuing consistency. Gradually, you see life less as a battlefield and more like a chessboard. You position yourself as the player who always thinks several moves ahead and feels ready to walk away if the game devolves into foolishness. You stop flinching, chasing, or defending yourself incessantly. You remain steadfast, unreadable, and undeniably in control. True power isn't measured by what you can do. It's defined by what you can choose not to do. It's in resisting the temptation to use your strength for destruction, even when you know you hold that power. This self-control is intimidating. It commands respect not through aggression, but through discipline and an unshakable sense of self. People begin to question themselves before they dare to question you. The journey leads you to cultivate a version of yourself that no longer seeks fairness from the world, but creates balance on your terms. A version that doesn't demand loyalty, but quietly observes it. One that lives its boundaries without needing to declare them aloud. You no longer require the world to be good because you're strong enough to navigate it as it is. And in doing so, you become someone unshakable, a person who doesn't fracture under betrayal, doesn't plead for closure, and doesn't unravel when things fall apart because you've already rebuilt yourself from worse experiences. You're left with two choices: break or evolve into ruthless self-possession. Once you choose the latter, there's no turning back, not out of bitterness, but out of unshakable self-awareness. Finally recognizing your worth means never outsourcing its definition to anyone else again. And here's what many neglect to tell you. When you step into this sharpened version of yourself, everything starts to change. People look at you differently. They speak to you differently. There's a hesitation, a pause, before they push your limits, because while they may not fully understand what has shifted, they feel it. You don't need to raise your voice or prove your strength outwardly. The sharpness is silent, like a blade concealed behind steady eyes, but always felt by those in your presence. That is true power. You no longer move through life seeking or begging. Instead, you evaluate situations and people alike. Does this person bring clarity or confusion? Does this circumstance fortify you or weaken you? If it leans toward chaos, you sever ties cleanly and without hesitation. No guilt, no second chances. Not everything deserves a place in your life simply because it once made you feel good. As Machiavelli might put it, this is strategic cruelty, not in action, but in discernment. Ruthlessness isn't about how you handle enemies. It's about how you preserve your peace amidst all else. At some point, it's necessary to stop equating your ability to endure pain with a sense of pride. Pain is not a form of currency. Treating it as such will only attract those who expect you to pay with your suffering. So, make a choice. No more over-explaining, no more pleading to be understood, and no more granting endless chances out of fear of being perceived as harsh. Cut through the noise. State your boundaries clearly and enforce them through your actions. People don't learn how to treat you by listening to lectures. They learn through consequences. The moment someone understands that crossing you brings no rewards, they either stop or remove themselves from your life. And that's fine. Let them leave. In fact, as Machiavelli might put it, let them believe the decision is entirely theirs. That's the strategy, not force, but making resistance so exhausting that compliance becomes the easier path. This isn't manipulation. It's a more efficient use of your energy. It's rejecting the idea that you have to convince others of your worth. It's understanding that not everyone deserves access to all of you, and often, silence speaks louder than words. When people realize you're not emotionally reliant on them, they show their true selves. The masks fall away, the manipulation becomes clear, and you're left with the clarity to make decisions based on reality, not illusion. This clarity brings immense benefits. By refusing to entertain performances or facades, you focus your life on what's real. Conversations become fewer but more meaningful. Relationships may reduce in number but increase in quality. Drama fades, leaving space for progress. Noise subsides, replaced by precision. And in that newfound calmness, in this deliberate control, lies your power. Some will criticize this transformation, calling you cold, distant, or too serious. They're not wrong. You have changed. But you had to, because the person you were before was drowning in chaos, overthinking, and unreciprocated emotional effort. You used to shrink yourself to accommodate others. Now you take up space without apology. You bent endlessly until you nearly snapped. Now you prioritize yourself and let things break if needed. If this makes others uneasy, let them be uncomfortable. Your purpose isn't to be universally pleasing. It's to embrace your power unapologetically. At some point, it's necessary to stop equating your ability to endure pain with a sense of pride. Pain is not a form of currency. Treating it as such will only attract those who expect you to pay with your suffering. So, make a choice. No more over-explaining, no more pleading to be understood, and no more granting endless chances out of fear of being perceived as harsh. Cut through the noise. State your boundaries clearly and enforce them through your actions. People don't learn how to treat you by listening to lectures. They learn through consequences. The moment someone understands that crossing you brings no rewards, they either stop or remove themselves from your life. And that's fine. Let them leave. In fact, as Machiavelli might put it, let them believe the decision is entirely theirs. That's the strategy, not force, but making resistance so exhausting that compliance becomes the easier path. This isn't manipulation, it's a more efficient use of your energy. It's rejecting the idea that you have to convince others of your worth. It's understanding that not everyone deserves access to all of you, and often, silence speaks louder than words. When people realize you're not emotionally reliant on them, they show their true selves. The masks fall away, the manipulation becomes clear, and you're left with the clarity to make decisions based on reality, not illusion. This clarity brings immense benefits. By refusing to entertain performances or facades, you focus your life on what's real. Conversations become fewer but more meaningful. Relationships may reduce in number but increase in quality. Drama fades, leaving space for progress. Noise subsides, replaced by precision. And in that newfound calmness, in this deliberate control, lies your power. Some will criticize this transformation, calling you cold, distant, or too serious. They're not wrong. You have changed. But you had to, because the person you were before was drowning in chaos, overthinking, and unreciprocated emotional effort. You used to shrink yourself to accommodate others. Now you take up space without apology. You bent endlessly until you nearly snapped. Now you prioritize yourself and let things break if needed. If this makes others uneasy, let them be uncomfortable. Your purpose isn't to be universally pleasing. It's to embrace your power unapologetically.